So, when you hear the name Baidu, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's the Google of China, right? But what if I told you the core idea behind it actually came before Google? Yeah, you heard that right. Today, we're going to unpack the story of this tech giant, how it built an absolute empire, then faced a crisis that almost broke it, and now, well, now it's betting the farm on a totally new identity. So first off, where did that name even come from? You might think it's some techie, made-up word, but nope. It's actually from a classic Chinese poem from over 800 years ago. The name Baidu literally translates to hundreds of times, and it's pulled from this line about a persistent, relentless search for something beautiful and ideal. Kind of wild, right? A super poetic origin for a massive search engine? And that poetic name, it was chosen by the company's founder, Robin Li. And honestly, his whole career has been one long, relentless search. Fun fact, his journey didn't even start in China. It started in, of all places, New Jersey, where he was working for a part of Dow Jones, building, you guessed it, search engine algorithms. And it was right there that the idea for Baidu really began to take shape. Okay, pay attention to the date here, 1996. This is when Robin Li created something called RankDex. Now, the idea behind it was simple but absolutely genius. The more sites that link to a specific web page, the more important that page must be. If that sounds familiar, that's because it is. It's the exact same idea behind Google's famous PageRank. But here's the kicker. Li developed this in '96. That's 2 full years before Google was even a thing. And get this, Google's own patents actually cite his original work. Crazy, right? So with this game-changing tech in his back pocket, things just took off. Li went back to China, co-founded Baidu in the year 2000, and from there, the growth was just insane. Fast forward to 2005, they have this huge IPO on the NASDAQ, and then just 2 years after that, they make history. They become the very first Chinese company to get into the NASDAQ 100. It was basically a massive announcement to the world. There's a new player in town. But look, becoming a giant wasn't just about having the best search engine. To really lock in their position, Baidu did what all the big tech companies do. They built a whole digital ecosystem around it, a walled garden of services that became essential for millions and millions of internet users in China. And this table really shows you just how big that ecosystem is. It's pretty wild. If you need something like Wikipedia, they've got Baidu Baike. Want a community forum, kind of like Reddit? That's Baidu Taiba. Need to get somewhere? Baidu Maps. Feel like watching a video? They've got iQIYI. You see the pattern here? Baidu basically wove itself into the very fabric of everyday life online in China. So at this point, the company looked absolutely unstoppable, right? I mean, they were the gateway to the internet for an entire nation. But with that kind of power comes a ton of responsibility. And that responsibility, well, it was about to lead to Baidu's biggest challenge ever. A moment that would force them to look in the mirror and ask what kind of company they really were. And that brings us to this central question, one that would completely define Baidu's next chapter. Because back in 2016, a truly terrible story began, and it all started with a simple search. So let me tell you about Wei Zexi. He was just 21 years old, a college student, when he got diagnosed with a very rare and aggressive form of cancer. And like any of us would do in that situation, he and his family turned to the internet, just looking for some hope. And right there at the very top of his Baidu search results was what looked like a breakthrough. It was a promotion for a cancer therapy at a hospital in Beijing, and it was framed as this cutting-edge, promising new treatment. The one crucial detail that wasn't obvious? It was a paid ad. His family poured everything they had into it, over 200,000 yuan, which is a huge amount of money. But the treatment didn't work. And in April of 2016, Wei Zexi tragically passed away. But before he died, he did something incredibly brave. He went online and he told his story, pointing directly at Baidu's search results for leading him to that hospital. And his story just exploded. The public outrage was massive. People were accusing Baidu of putting profits ahead of human lives. Things got so heated that the government had to step in and launch an investigation. This led to brand new, much stricter rules about online advertising, especially for medical stuff. For Baidu, its reputation was absolutely in tatters. For Baidu, this was more than just a PR nightmare. This was an existential crisis. Think about it. The trust in their main product, the very thing their company was built on, was just gone. With their brand destroyed and the public furious, they had to make a choice. And they made a huge one. They decided to pivot hard and search for a totally new future. And that pivot was one of the biggest you'll see in modern tech. They decided to go all in on artificial intelligence. And I'm not talking about some small side project here. No, this was a complete reinvention of the entire company, a fundamental shift from being the search company to being the AI company. And this chart here really spells it out, the then versus the now. The company that was all about internet services and online ads, now it's all about AI. The search engine giant is now focused on autonomous driving. The ad business is taking a backseat to building these massive foundation models. It is a 180-degree turn. And one of the biggest examples of this new direction is something called the Apollo project. They launched it back in 2017. Basically, it's an open-source platform for self-driving car tech. The goal wasn't just for Baidu to build its own driverless car. The goal was way bigger. They wanted to build the brain that could go into everyone's self-driving car. And hey, this isn't just some far-off dream. This is happening right now. Look at this number, 6 million. That is the number of rides that Baidu's fully driverless robotaxi service, Apollo Go, has already completed. We're talking about real cars on real streets with no driver. That is tangible, measurable progress on one of the hardest problems in all of technology. And it's not just about self-driving cars. Baidu is also fighting on the other huge AI front, generative AI. You've heard of ChatGPT, right? Well, Baidu launched its own version called Ernie Bot. It's a clear sign that they are not messing around. They want to be a dominant force across the entire AI landscape. So let's just take a breath and recap this incredible journey. We've gone from a line in an ancient poem to a search pioneer that was ahead of its time to an untouchable internet giant. Then through a devastating crisis of trust, and now a radical reinvention as an AI-first company. It's been a wild ride. Yeah, this really nails the whole story arc, doesn't it? You have the pioneer, who built something before anyone else, then the giant, who dominated everything, then the crisis, which brought them to their knees, and now, the pivot. One of the boldest corporate turnarounds you'll ever see. It really is a search for a second act. And that leaves us with one final big question. The company that was literally born from a poem about a relentless search is now on its most important search yet. The search for a brand new identity. So will this massive all-or-nothing bet on AI actually work? Can it redefine their complicated legacy? And maybe most importantly, win back the trust they lost? I guess we'll just have to wait and see.